Train the muscles, not the joints.
Welcome back to Natural Balance Bodybuilding. Mountain. And today I'm going to do a few sets in the garage while I talk to you guys about a series of different concepts. What I'm first going to start with is something that I'm doing in my diet right now. I'm eating about 8 to 12 raw eggs a day, like yolks and all, right? I'm eating some liver, I'm eating chicken, I'm eating steak. I'm trying to nourish the body first and foremost. And I have talked about this a lot, but I'm going to talk about it again because I always encounter people who look at bodybuilding as a diminishment project, right? They're trying to just get rid of fat and use weight training as a way to do it along with their nutrition. And that's great. I mean, that's the great part about bodybuilding, is that it is a great form of exercise to maintain as much lean muscle mass as possible as you're losing body fat. Or you can use the weight training to just gain muscle, and then therefore the metabolic boost from doing so also assists with greater stable blood sugar, as well as burning body fat off in the long run. Now, depending on where you're starting will depend on what your priority is, right? Some people are extremely obese, and the first thing they should be concentrating on is, of course, losing body fat, right? They have to be a bit more aggressive with their diet and so forth. But in the end, if you're truly training to have a bodybuilder look, at some point you have to reset back into the gaining muscle as the first priority. Right? Gaining muscle and strength is the first priority. And secondarily is the cutting off body fat, or basically diminishing body fat. So that's why you see a lot of bodybuilders, they have an off season. They're not constantly shredding all the time, because if they were, they'd be always in a deficit. They wouldn't have enough raw material to gain muscle. So the thing I think, and this is just a theory, but I do think this is true, I think a lot of people that are in the older age population should be concentrating more on body building. They should be concentrating on how or what dietary adjustments they need to make in order to gain muscle. Because the muscle is the first thing that goes as you age. And if the muscle goes, it causes all sorts of other problems, right? Now, I'm not saying for you to be morbidly obese, like, 30%, 40% body fat and say, oh, I got to gain some muscle, and just not pay attention to your diet at all. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that your first priority should be gaining muscle. And secondarily, what you do is you adjust your diet accordingly. So if you find that you're eating a lot of great protein and you're eating some good fats and you're eating some carbs and you're making sure that the body has everything it needs to grow, and then you start putting on body fat, well then obviously, if you're putting on a lot of body fat, you might have to back off on the fat a little bit, or back off on the carbohydrates a bit, and replace that with protein and so forth. So you do make adjustments. But what a lot of people do is that they panic and then they just drop things. Like they'll drop the fat down to, very, very low. They'll drop the carbs down to very low. And then they'll start to emaciate themselves. And sure, they might get some more veins, right? But they start to catabolize a lot of that hard-earned muscle. So you don't want to be doing it that aggressively, and you want to find that happy medium. And I find the happiest medium is the amount of food where you could still gain muscle but not be gaining fat, right? If you can find that happy medium, especially when you're in a 15% body fat range, 15%, 20%, if you're finding a way to maintain that and just put on muscle, I think you're better off than hyperfixating on having single digit body fat levels and trying to put on muscle at the same time. I think you're going to cause it's possible that you'll basically cause an impediment in your training, because you're going to be limiting your food so much and concentrating on that you're not necessarily going to be experimenting on what is truly nourishing the body and making it feel better. So I've talked about this a lot. Like a lot of people talk to me and say, oh, when are you going to cut? When are you going to cut? I'm not really interested in cutting. I'm interested in what diet helps my body feel the best all the time. And if I'm not shredded, I'm okay with that, as long as I'm able to feel like I can be strong in the gym, as well as increase in reps, have good endurance, and muscular recovery. That's the most important thing. And then from there, of course, if I can adjust the diet a little bit just to skim off a bit of body fat here and there, I'll do so, but I'm not going to be super aggressive with that, because losing muscle, what's the point, right? If you gain a bunch of muscle and then you skim it all off, what's the point? You're not really doing your best to maintain it. And like I said, as you get older, maintaining muscle becomes more the weak link. That it becomes a harder thing to do. So yeah, that's what I gotta say. I think you should reset back into this priority, at least from time to time. You know, maybe you want to do a 2-month cut or something like that, or 3 months a year, whatever. If you want to do that, you can. You know, obviously this is an individual creative project that we all go through, called this natural bodybuilding journey. But if you have a, you know, medium to faster metabolism, you know, and you're able to maintain 10 to 15% body fat pretty regularly, then I would say don't spend so much time trying to concentrate on getting those ab veins. You know, concentrate your diet more on what is it going to take to nourish the body with all the nutrients it needs, including minerals. You know, that's why I eat a lot of organ meat too, and all that stuff. So you got to make sure that nourishment's the first thing, because if you're deficient in something, that's when your health goes sideways. And again, I'd like to make this into a health journey, not necessarily a deficiency journey. And if you're on a perpetual diet, deficiencies are a lot easier to come by. Let's just put it that way, you know. So yeah, let's do a set of 70-pound dumbbells as a warm-up, and then I'll move up and weight a bit and see how it feels today. So what I find is that if you're eating enough protein or eating enough food, you'll start to notice that your muscles look a bit more pumped and more shapely, even in a relaxed state. You can see when the muscles are nourished up or fuller, right? But when you're in a depletion sort of diet, or you're not eating enough, you're gonna notice that after you train the next day or two, you're gonna be totally flattened out, or you're gonna feel more see-through, like transparent, right? And at the same time, you're going to notice your recovery is down. So if something is diminishing your recovery, that cannot be the answer to you gaining muscle in this natural bodybuilding journey. So I also encourage you to experiment with higher fat diets, you know, higher carb diets, like back and forth. Play around with both. I go back and forth all the time because I find there is advantages to both. When I get my energy from fats, I notice that it seems to help reset my blood sugar in a certain way, so that when I start to eat starches more often again, they get used or utilized more efficiently. Like, it seems like my body seems to suck them up, and I get more pumpy and stuff when I eat them. Whereas after I eat carbs and lower fat, so after I eat carbs and protein for a period of time, then I notice that at some point the carbs start to almost not get absorbed properly, where I feel like my body just almost doesn't want them. Like, I lose my appetite for them, and at the same time, I notice that my muscles don't necessarily get that pumped look from them anymore. I don't get the same energy from them. So I find that's when it's best for me to go back to a bit of a higher fat diet for energy, and then maybe lower down the carbs a bit. Maybe, you know, I might have a meal or two, because I don't want to diminish my glycogen stores. I don't want to emaciate myself in any way, but at the same time, I'll move more to a majority of fats as my energy source instead of carbohydrates. Now, the other thing is that, you know, sometimes the fats thing is also good to fat load a bit, right? Because as Vince Gironda said, now I'm not like a huge Vince Gironda fan, but he did say some things, and he had some interesting points. But, you know, he talked about eating 36 eggs a day is a very anabolic diet. Well, it probably should be, because there's a lot of protein there, but also a lot of cholesterol and a lot of calories, right? But the bottom line is that if you're eating enough of the nutrients and you're constantly feeding this to the body, it's going to have an easier time recovering, and you're going to be able to put on muscle. And sometimes one could argue that carbohydrates are great to a point, but if you're eating them and you've already filled up the glycogen stores, it could be garbage food, comparatively speaking, to good quality cholesterol, and that's what your hormones and everything are made out of, right? So a lot of times experimentation is necessary, and you will find that sometimes saturating your body with protein and good quality fats is a good way to ensure that you have what your body needs in order to make proper hormones and also to recover, because there's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate, but there is such thing as an essential amino acid and an essential fat. So that's something to always remember. But yeah, I'm on both sides of the fence when it comes to these two diets, and I think one can accentuate the other, but I think there's going to be times where you need one more than the other. That's really my point. I don't think like a lot of people on the carnivore diet or vegetarian diets and stuff, I'm not necessarily exclusive. I'm not saying, okay, this is the only diet that works, but I think that if you experiment a bit, you might find the right combination that helps you feel more pumpy and lumpy and helps you get that protein in, and make sure that your foundation of your nutrition is nourishment first, cutting second, right? Nourishment has to be there. You have to nourish those muscles and the body's health. Mountain. That's good. Got a couple sets in of inclines, and now I'll talk about another subject here. And that has to do with minor adjustments for certain exercises that you might need to do. So case in point, one of the things that I always talk about, or I've talked about a lot anyway, is front delt raises, and how a lot of times they're probably not necessary for most people, because a lot of us are doing a lot of pressing movements and doing shoulder presses and so forth. So you're probably getting a lot more front delt activation than rear delt. Now, another reason why I've said this is because a lot of times with front delt raises, depending on how you do them, like if I do them like this, I find I get a lot of bicep tendon irritation and so forth. So it seems to irritate my shoulders, right? It never seemed to agree with me, but some people, it works really well. But for myself, if I make a minor adjustment, such as slightly pronating, right? Facing the palms to the ground, then I don't have any issue, right? Now, of course, one could argue I'm not getting the same front delt activation, but to tell you the truth, I like this one better because I get a lot of a trap as well as medial and a bit of front delt at the same time. So as I'm doing this, because the shoulders round forward a bit and come back, I'm getting a lot of delt work, and it feels, pretty good. So, so one of the things you have to remember is that it's okay to have a subtle variation for your own individual situation, because we're all built different. Like I've said before, skull crushers is the other one I talked about. If I pronate my hands and do barbell, irritated elbows. But if I slightly supinate and face the little finger up to the roof, right, when I'm doing it, no problem at all, right? Then I have great elbows. It feels great. Everything feels perfect, right? So sometimes you're throwing out an exercise that might be an effective exercise for you, but you just need to make a small adjustment in order for it to work with your bodily dimensions. Now, another thing to watch out for is that there will be some movements that cause constant clicking of the shoulders or the elbows or something like that. It's usually a sign that you either have some sort of muscle knot or some sort of weird kind of muscle imbalance or something going on, right? Usually it's a trigger point that you need some massage on or something, or it can be just the fact that you're doing an exercise in the wrong way for you. You need to make some sort of subtle adjustment. So in skull crushers, I used to realize that when I do skull crushers like this, if I bring the elbows back just a little bit, it makes a huge difference in how much stress just goes to the belly instead of putting it on the elbow, right? So just making these minor adjustments can make profound changes in how you train. And the same thing with ranges of motion. Like when I'm doing the inclines, if I've come down more, I can do the movement no problem, but I start to get a weird clicking in the shoulder, or sometimes a weird kind of twinging feeling in a certain area. And this could be from, my hockey playing days when I took weird hits and all this. But the thing is that I don't care about why it's there as much as I just pay attention, and I use the range of motion that allows me to feel good as I'm doing the movement and to feel the muscle, but not irritate the joints, right? Because if you irritate the joints, you're just going to inflame something up, and then what's the point of that? Because at some point it'll prevent you from training altogether. So yeah, don't be afraid to make minor adjustments. And just because you do something different than, say, some other bullshitter on the internet, doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means that you're honoring your own individuality. So one thing people get lost in is sometimes they worry about whether they lose reps on a certain exercise. And you know, you can get too hyperfixated on that. So yesterday, for instance, I did some front delts with some front raises, right? And then I noticed that when I went to go do inclines today, I lost a few reps off my incline press. But I don't really worry about it because I know the front delts are fatigued from yesterday. And yes, they're getting stimulated today, but just in a different way because they're slightly sore. Now, the next time I do delts, maybe I'll just concentrate on side delts or rear delts, and maybe I won't do any front raises, and of course my incline will pop back up again. So in the end, it all balances out. That's all I'm gonna say. It's not like if you lose 2 reps off your bench or something like that one day, or 1 rep or something, it's not like you lose all your gains, you know what I'm saying? Let's just say your front delt might be getting stimulated even more, because one could argue that you're doing a bit more frequency. Right? So I believe in increasing frequency and lowering frequency, and in playing with the ebb and flow of the movements. So it's not always linear as far as your gains. Your gains don't go up linearly. Like, I've talked about this with a few people, but I've noticed back in the day, you know, when I get gains in a certain area, a lot of other body parts that I had would be lagging behind. And some body parts would grow while others seem to just stay the same or stagnate. And then I go through a growth spurt in another area. So my whole body didn't always grow at the same time. You know, some muscles would come up and the other ones would just remain the same. And that's okay. It's just part of the process. So I think you're better off experimenting and not getting too hyper-fixated on the numbers. I mean, they give you a general idea of what's happening. And it's good to know what your numbers are as far as how many reps you can get with a certain weight. But also take into account what you did the day before, because that can affect the numbers that you're getting today, right? They can affect how many reps you're getting or how much weight you can lift. So yeah, don't panic. Just stimulate and feed the body, and you will grow. That's really the most important thing. So yeah, I hope this helps out in your training. Thanks a lot for watching. If you need to get a hold of me, just go to naturalgalantbodybuilding.com, and thanks to the Patreon supporters, and take care for now. Mountain.